we're not nearly as flashy as Jamila.
Just quite the look she's got.
It's a huge contrast.
I know, exactly.
I do think you guys could step your wardrobe a
Where do you blow it up? Yeah.
Yeah, where's my inflatable?
Exactly. So I have to ask you first off, I'm a Shakespeare fan, so I love the title "All the World's a Stage."
Yes.
So if you want to elaborate on that, and say, I mean, really, all the titles are so cool this season.
That's an Aaron Walke episode, and it's a real big love letter to Star Trek. I don't know if you guys have played that episode yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's, I believe, Aaron would be able to speak to it best, but I believe Garrickson is like the one red shirt who lived like back in TOS days. And,
Or he mysteriously disappeared, I think.
yeah, and so Walke's a massive Trek fan, and he was like, whatever happened to that guy? And so that's,
And we wanted like that episode. We're still in our first season, right? This is the back half of our first season, right? So we were always wanting to build out what are the greatest hits of Star Trek episodes, and like I think All the World's a Stage really fits into that great classic.
the backward civilization.
The mystery,
them
or
as much as they teach
the
us.
episodes where you're landing on a planet that suddenly looks like Earth for some reason, and you're trying to figure out why.
Did you?
Go ahead, Ed. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is there a line to walk when you're doing a show like that where you have your character go, I just think that you? I mean, is there a kind of a line you have to walk because of Shatner and the fact is, or do you just embrace it and say the hell?
Well, that was D.
D.
Bradley Baker, I believe, right? That was D. Bradley, and he was.
Yeah, he loved doing Shatner.
Everybody really wants
He still talks about
Jason Alexander too loves it. Has a really great shot.
Yes.
Have you seen the video of Shatner looking at the imitations? It's on YouTube if you get a
no.
chance.
Oh,
I
and
gotta
I
look
think Jason Alexander is in there.
Is he?
He's
Oh,
not
okay.
very happy.
Beautiful. No.
No.
You bring up a very good point, though. I haven't thought if we'll hear from Shatner.
Yes.
I don't know.
What the hell are you doing?
I don't know.
They
I
were just
know.
a kid show.
Yeah, we're just having fun. It's a kid show.
Very
Yeah, exactly.
energetic. I mean, he's like going.
Yeah. So it's super fun.
He's like 90.
Right to the moon, or almost.
Yeah, space at least a little bit.
So there's no shortage of Trek series at this point in time, and you mentioned touching on some of the classic Trek sort of themes and episodes stuff. With this show, how do you balance the capturing the classic Trek flavors and paying homage to the old stories, and also keeping it fresh and new for a 2022 audience?
I think we're always having these conversations of, are we going to Trek? And some people would say, like, you can never go to Trek. But we want to remind, the audience that there is a new audience who doesn't know all of this stuff. So we want to celebrate the new as much as honor what's already come before us.
Yeah, I'm really. We were pulled aside not long ago by Rod Roddenberry, and he was just like, he's watching these episodes with his son, who's loving it with him, and he's like, I'm so proud of what you guys are doing. He's like, my father would love with what we're doing. So it was really
praise.
Yeah, it felt good.
I think the other shows are really bringing in new audience members.
Right.
My husband for a long time made fun of me as a Trekkie, but Lower Decks and Prodigy are two shows that he watched. They're his first Star Trek shows.
Is that right?
Yes.
I love it.
So,
I
what
love
do you
it.
think about bringing in these new audience members?
Well, I love it. I mean, that's what we always wanted. From day one, it was never going to be just a kid's show. We wanted to bring adults in, just like that. So I love it when I hear we don't have any kids, or we tuck the kids into bed, and my wife and I continued watching Prodigy. And I'm like, yes.
We also discussed that it's such dense canon that it can be intimidating for someone who's curious about Star Trek, but it feels like there's a barrier of entry of I don't know the difference between a Romulan and a Vulcan, and so it's like we wanted our show to answer those, hold their hand a little bit and get
reintroduce it.
One of the things I didn't expect when we learned Prodigy was coming was the inclusion of a lot of real hard science that we see in other Star Trek, and I think specifically of the time episode, and the fact that in what we're told as a kid's show, we have our characters talking about sine waves.
Yes.
And just how important is it to have that kind of almost educational
I
material
mean,
included.
science is entertaining. Science is fun. I mean, I remember when we were working on that episode, it started with, this crew is fractured by time. And then David Mack discussed about how time is oscillating.
He was one of our Star Trek advisors.
And he was
helped
explaining
make
how
sure that
the time dilation or whatever would change the further out you go from the blast. And now it's like, they're like, how cool is that? Can we get that across?
we were worried
in
though that it might have
22
been
minutes.
it took a while, right?
Yeah, it was about a 30-minute episode that we had to figure out how to get down to 22 minutes.
Ben can you want to talk about visually how we
Well, I mean, it's also the fun part is how to visualize it for kids. How to kind of you find the core, the essence of the idea or the concept, and then just try to between actions, reactions, and also visual kind of language to make some of those kind of like potentially quite heavy concept or quite complicated concept, but palatable or for a young audience. And I think that goes through emotion, that goes through curiosity, that goes through discovery. And that's what this episode in part is so powerful. It's such an emotional, such a simple setup to understand. I think, although it's very complicated in the background when you start drilling into it, but the emotional experience that you get allow you to engage with it in a very different way.
That's one, and I love that working on the show. One of the fondest things is thinking about a kid might understand this, and their head's going to be sparking.
Yeah.
or even the littlest kids who don't fully understand it, they still understand something happened to Rock, right?
Yeah.
And and she was alone, and they still understood, that they're fractured in
Like
time.
when we were kids watching Wrath of Khan, and the SETI eel goes in the ear and it makes you go mad or whatever. I was like, that's crazy. It's scary, but I'm like, it makes sense.
So as you start a series, you have a blank canvas, pretty much a blank canvas. You have a concept, but then you need stories, you need themes, you need characters, you need all the visual style of this,
Artists.
on top of it. So so when you're developing this, what's the process to start filling in that canvas, knowing that also this is not going to be a one and done like a film that you can, beginning and end.
Yeah.
It's got to be expansive as well.
It's a little bit like when you're making a puzzle, and like you find the edges.
Yeah, we
So
start with
very
the edges,
early on,
right?
you go, what's your way into the story? Like, what's interesting? And then you go, well, where does the story end? Or not when I say end, or what's a finale? What's a big moment? So we knew what would always happen on episode. We first knew how we opened it, episode 1. We then knew what we were going to do in episode 20, and then we thought backwards and go, okay, what's episode 10? So we kind of put stake posts. And I think that's from our feature. We've done a lot of feature work, so we're constantly thinking about the best endings are the ones where everything's set up in the very beginning. So you kind of have to see that whole.
I was going to say that's just on the page, Now it goes to Ben, and how do we visualize and continue to?
I mean, the great process. When
You got it.
I'm
He's
changing my thoughts.
an artist, not the
Changing
words.
my thoughts. We had almost had 20 episodes fully written before we
Yeah.
started
Yeah,
design. Which is, so we had a really clear end goal, and we understood the density of the show. Because in animation that's also very important. It's different in film, and the fabrication is very specific. And so we had a really great understanding of the arc of the characters, how they would change, kind of like how many worlds we would visit. And so we could kind of like retro-engineer our approach to design and how simplified or not we needed the style to be. So a lot of what was on the page influenced how the show ended up looking, even though it wasn't all written in words, but it was just like the tone of it. So that's how we kind of feel the gaps.
A lot of recent Trek has had. I felt like it's gotten away from the tenets of Star Trek in the sense of Starfleet's corrupt. There's a bad admiral here. There's a lot of that stuff. And this show to me feels very much like the tenets of Star Trek, that it's really capturing the essence of what Star Trek is supposed to be. But at the beginning, when you sat down and mapped this out, was that part of the thought process? Because there's been so much that has gotten away from.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, again, we knew that this could be the introductory show into the greater universe of Star Trek. We wanted, even back to TOS, we wanted to have that spirit,
And Kurtzman was instrumental too. I remember him saying people want strong Starfleet, like they want a positive Starfleet, and so that was helpful. I mean, but it was also we're creating a goal for these kids to want to get to. So it's like we wanted the shiny.
It's the Wizard of Oz. It's Emerald City, right? It's Dorothy on a quest, and so yeah, it had to be glorious, right? It has to be shiny and like a beautiful place. Yeah.
You've also created a story where they're afraid of Starfleet in some ways. Or maybe they're more afraid of getting in trouble.
Yeah,
So-
they're afraid of getting in trouble.
Yeah. So Starfleet is both their goal, but they're also being pursued
An
by
antagonist.
they're
They're not a
antagonists.
villain.
doing
They're
that.
just we always these next 10 episodes were heavily inspired by the movie The Fugitive and how we loved Tommy Lee Jones hunting down Richard Kimball, right? And we and you love both. Like you
understand it.
You understand it. It's a cat and mouse game, and it's like it's a chase.
Starfleet has rules. Yeah.
And so I think it's fun because you're going to love both sides. You're going to love her hunting them down because she doesn't know who's piloting the ship, right?
Well, that they're a threat to Starfleet.
Yeah,
I mean, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah, there's a rogue
they
ship.
themselves, yeah.
There's a rogue ship.
They are a threat to the thing in which they've learned to love.
Yeah,
Tragic.
great.
Are there any other plans to bring in other Voyager characters in some form? I know timelines.
Well,
There will be in these next 10. We are bringing back Ronnie Cox, Admiral Jellicoe.
Because he's the perfect foil to Admiral Janeway. We wanted someone higher up who's just going to tell her, no, you can't do that.
And then we have Okana coming in. The outrageous Okana is coming in. And then we can't tell you who, but there's some much bigger players coming in season 2.
Because our characters are now getting into Federation space more, right? So we're going to be seeing Romulans, Klingons, the Borg. We're going to be playing with all these fantastic elements to Star Trek.
I love that you're leaning in.
Yes!
It's so fun.
The Romulans!
I'm so looking forward to how it develops. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any plans for? I don't know how this would work for 7 of 9 since she's on Picard. Like any kind of creative magic.
We're not using ringers to say. But there
That's not a spoiler.
are some amazing
Hey.
prizes.
Hey!
Thank you so much.